Chapter 8. The group walked along in silence, with Tarhoon being ahead of the group a bit. Shirk broke the silence eventually. "Guys, you hear that?" Shirk asked. The group stopped and listened. Tarhoon heard nothing. Then he realized it. That was the point. No birds twittered, no animals, and no wind. The woods were almost deafening with silence. "It's the sound of silence," Shirk said after a few moments. Tarhoon glanced around to see if anything was unnaturally wrong. Disease in the trees, perhaps. Anything to indicate they had stumbled into a place of dark magic. There was nothing. The flora was completely fine. The grass grew normally, and flowers were scattered across the forest floor. There was simply nothing to be heard. Even when they began to walk again, the only noise was the soft clink of armor and the soft pads of their footfalls upon the earth. Finally, a tower came into view. It jutted directly out of a cliffside on one side of the valley. It angled out and then went up. "I just realized we forgot a housewarming gift," Elwood mused. "We do have a head in a bag," Fee pointed out. "No, that's returning the rightful property to its owner," Elwood clarified, looking up at the tower. "You want a housewarming gift?" Shirk asked with a raised eyebrow. "Just a measure of good faith," Elwood replied. "If we can avoid the fighting, then let's do the avoiding of the fighting, shall we?" "Do you have anything of value to give him?" Shirk responded. "This king of the forest dude?" "We have..." Elwood pulled off his pack and looked inside as he walked. "Strange meat jerky." "I don't think he's gonna accept that," Shirk replied. Shirk had been rather subdued since the incident on the road. He was still relatively upbeat, but his remarks had lost part of their happiness. "Food usually works, though," Elwood said with a chuckle. "I could, sing him a song or something," Shirk offered. Tarhoon, who had been quiet thus far, spoke up. "Given that he takes himself to be the king of the forest, I believe he sees us as having been in his abode for a while now." "Ah, that's right. We offer Tarhoon as a sacrifice," Shirk responded. "I would do that," Fee agreed. "I would disagree with that," Elwood responded, slight laughter in his voice. "Well, I don't see anything else to do, so let's just keep walking then," Shirk said, with mock exasperation. The closer they got to the tower, the more they saw that it was extremely dilapidated. The classic pointed cone-style roof was filled with holes worn from years of abuse by falling rocks, and the whole tower was extremely weather-beaten. Many stones were missing from its walls, and Tarhoon was amazed the tower still clung so stubbornly to the cliffside. A stream cut a semicircle around the tower, and it was clear the stream had been rerouted specifically for that purpose. Why, though? Tarhoon couldn't guess. They approached a strong wooden door beneath the tower that had been cut directly into the cliff face. Tarhoon approached the door and rapped his knuckles sharply and heavily upon the wooden surface, although not aggressively. They heard nothing from the other side of the door. Tarhoon heard Fee's soft footsteps walk up behind him and looked over his shoulder to see her crouched, hiding behind. "We were invited here as guests," Elwood pointed out. "It would be very rude of him to kill us." Eventually, they heard the sound of someone's footsteps approaching. Hold on, I'm coming." Someone's voice came from the other side of the door, and several bolts were drawn. Tarhoon's eyes narrowed at the sound of such heavy security. A small rectangle had been cut out from the door, but covered with another piece of wood, and this was opened. A pair of eyes peered out at them. "What?" a woman's voice replied. "We seek audience with the master of the forest," Tarhoon replied firmly. "King of the forest is his proper title. Use it," Elwood rebutted. "Yeah, what he said," Shirk chimed in. "You the people?" the voice asked, undaunted. "We were invited here by the master's goodwill," Tarhoon responded. "People's a broad term," Shirk replied. "All right, fine." The other person slid the slot shut. "Hold on." "King, Tarhoon, king," Elwood rebuked. More locks and bolts were undone from the top of the door all the way to the bottom. They heard a door open, but it wasn't the one right in front of them. Then another column of locks and bolts were undone closer, and then the door in front of them swung open. The woman in front of them was a human in black robes who appeared to be around 20 years old. She wore a band around her head for adornment. She had a very displeased look on her face. "Hello," she said in a sharp tone through a frown. "Are you the king of the forest?" Shirk asked. Tarhoon's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Elwood, however, did reply. "No, this is not the king of the forest," he told Shirk, giving a look of incredulity. "Why are you saying that?" Fee asked. "Just because she's a woman?" she demanded. "No, it's because—" Tarhoon cut Elwood off. "If you would please direct us to the king of the forest immediately," Tarhoon said loudly. "I do appreciate that," the woman told Fee in a kinder tone. "But no, that ain't me. Just come on." She took her staff in her hand and began to move inward. "Thank you," Elwood responded, and the group moved inside. Tarhoon soon learned that the tower was the tip of the iceberg, and that it was really only an external part of an entire fortress that had been carved out from the mountain itself. Each room was made of rock, floor, ceiling, and walls. In each hall and room there were torch sconces, but instead of torches, each sconce held luminescent rocks, which shed light on the whole area. "Don't touch the stones," the woman yelled behind her harshly. "Those are mine." "But I want the rock more than you," Shirk responded, seeming disappointed. The woman turned and gave Shirk a fierce glare. It almost reminded Tarhoon of... "Why?" the woman questioned firmly. Shirk seemed taken aback by this question. I don't, actually," he admitted. The woman squinted at him. "Let's just keep going," Fee replied cheerfully. The woman turned and began to walk up the stairs. "Shirk, stop before your thoughts outpace your..." Tarhoon began to speak, but realized he'd confused what he was actually trying to say. "Where were you going with that?" Fee smirked. "Yeah, where were you going with that, Tarhoon? I want to hear the rest of this awesome burn," Shirk agreed, folding his arms over his chest. Tarhoon could feel the blood rising to his face, but his scales concealed his embarrassment. "I've had a long day," he replied succinctly, before turning and moving up the stairs. "Yeah, oh really?" Shirk replied sarcastically, before he followed. "I'm going to use my smacking hand on both of you," Elwood told him. "I will deflect that with my whole arm," Shirk replied over his shoulder. The staircase led directly up, about 60 feet to the tower, before they opened another door. This one was locked, and the woman in front of them looked very annoyed. She knocked on it, and a man opened it. He was a mild-mannered-looking man, with hair combed sharply away from a point in the middle left side of his head. He was sharply dressed as well, and looked as though he was a butler of some sort. "Why didn't he open the door downstairs?" Shirk whispered to Elwood. Elwood shrugged but didn't respond. "Hello. Welcome to this abode. Of the king, I guess," the man said in a rather droll voice. "Yes, hello, thank you," Elwood responded. The man gestured to the woman who had accompanied them, who left to go elsewhere. "Tight security around here. Expecting rude company?" "What can I do for you gentlemen?" the man replied. "We seek an audience with the king of the forest. Actually, we were invited." Shirk stepped forward as he said this. The man responded. "Did anyone tell me that?" He pulled out a small black book and began to thumb through it, quietly muttering to himself as the group looked at each other awkwardly. "Did anyone mention a group coming to see the king?" he asked loudly. No one responded. "We have a head. A literally talking head here." Shirk pointed to the bag where Tarhoon kept the head securely. "Oh, I'm sorry, what?" the man asked, confused. This, I think, is what your associates requested," El said. Tarhoon passed him the sack, and Elwood gently pulled the still-living corpse head from the bag. "This guy could talk earlier. I don't know how he's feeling now," Shirk added. "I see." The man seemed unimpressed. "Hold on, Binis." The woman from earlier returned from down the stairs. "Your zombie head." The man in front of them took the head and passed it to her. "Do things," he said, shooing her back down. "Unfortunately, the king is out on an excursion up north. But I suppose if he invited you, we can set you up with temporary quarters," the man told them. "Great," Shirk replied happily. "I'd love to sleep in an actual bed." "Do you have any idea how long he'll be gone?" Tarhoon demanded. "Not really," the man replied tentatively. "In the meantime, there is a library if you'd like to do that. In the library." "Reading? Ah, yes. Thank you." Elwood nodded in agreement. "Many books of lore about the valley itself and the previous inhabitants before they mysteriously were obliterated, and all that fun stuff," the man continued. "And anyways..." He took them through a couple of hallways until they reached a certain hall that had several small rooms down the length of it. Each was very Spartan in its layout, only possessing a mattress with nothing else. One particular room had a tapestry in it, but the others simply had rugs tacked to the wall. The haphazard nature of the lodgings made it clear they were thrown together very quickly. "How long have you guys been here for?" Shirk asked curiously. "Excuse me, I must speak with my companions." The man bowed out and left without answering. "Where is the library from here?" Tarhoon asked the retreating figure. "And where do we get food?" Shirk added. "Oh, Shirk, here, have some jerky," Elwood offered. "I don't want your jerky," Shirk responded. Tarhoon rolled his eyes involuntarily. "We have to feed you." "Oh, no," the man replied, looking a bit flustered. He turned to Tarhoon. "The library is on the right." He pointed down a corridor at the end of the hallway. Tarhoon proceeded in that direction. "Nerd!" he heard Shirk call after him. "Idiot!" Tarhoon replied, although he didn't know if he'd said it loud enough for Shirk to hear. He was immediately ashamed of himself for taking the bait. "Where did you say the kitchen was? Or the dining hall?" Fee asked eagerly from behind Tarhoon. "That would be... It's down there. Just follow that. It will lead you to the main dining room. Someone there should be able to help you. Probably.
Ah, thank you.
Tarhoon heard steps scurrying away from him. Elwood caught up to Tarhoon, followed by Shirk a moment later. They proceeded down the hallway. I want to explore the castle, Shirk declared. I'm not going to do anything weird, just looking around.
Don't steal anything, and don't break anything,
Elwood told Shirk, in a light-hearted but still stern tone. I will not, for a second, keep my word about anything, Shirk replied. He tried to run past Tarhoon through the door they were headed to, but Tarhoon barred it and looked Shirk directly in the eyes. If you do anything to draw the ire of our host, Tarhoon said in the most serious tone he could, I will personally see to it that I remove your head from your shoulders. I wouldn't dream of such a thing, Shirk responded neutrally. He walked in the other direction before Tarhoon could remove his arm.
Does anyone want me to bring them snacks?
Fee's voice echoed from the stairs. Oh, I would love a snack, if you can find me, Shirk joked.
Okay,
Fee called back. Tarhoon made his way into the library, and Elwood followed close behind. The library was a well-sized room with bookshelves lining the walls and a large rectangular table in the center of it. 2 candelabras, evenly spaced on the table, held the same light stones they had seen on the walls, but light from a window set high on the outer wall lit the room as well. The bookshelves had ladders attached to them to reach the higher shelves, but the room was not in good repair. Gaps could be seen where books had fallen onto the floor or been removed and not replaced, and several books could be seen on the table in the middle of the room. The entire place seemed dusty, and there were cobwebs in the corners.
You know, with a proper crew operating this place, I think it could be a very homely manor,
Elwood observed. I agree, Tarhoon replied. Elwood walked past Tarhoon to investigate the books on the table, and Tarhoon followed. 2 books lay there. One of them was called The History of the Valley, and it seemed to detail an old civilization that had used to thrive in the same valley in which they now stood. Several tribes had lived there, united by a single government, until they all vanished quite suddenly. Tarhoon began to wonder, if the tribesmen had vanished before this book had been written, who had built the castle? He filed the question away in his mind and continued on to the second book. The second book was a hefty tome about the myth and superstitions of a town that Tarhoon had never heard of. He presumed it was a town belonging to the tribesmen. The page it was currently open to described what the tribesmen thought would happen if they saw too many toads. Tarhoon did notice, though, more importantly, that several of the corners in the book had been folded over to mark certain pages. There was also a notebook next to the book with several scribblings in it. The notebook seemed to be by someone researching the King of the Forest. Tarhoon noticed now, though, that they referred to the being as the King in the Forest, rather than the King of the Forest. He found that curious. The book referred to him by the same title. Tarhoon wondered if, over time, the former had morphed into the latter, making this book very old indeed. Several of the notes went back to the valley, and Tarhoon saw one page that was titled, Weaknesses, Strengths Extrapolations. Tarhoon flipped to the front of the notebook to see if there was any indication of who had written these notes. It was a mostly plain book with a solid cover and slight embroidery at the corners. Tarhoon flipped in a few pages and saw that several of the notes were tagged with the name Yorick. Tarhoon wondered if Yorick had been the man who had directed them earlier. Elwood and Tarhoon glanced at each other, and Elwood got up and began to look through the bookshelves, pulling out books here and there. Tarhoon kept leafing through the notebook and, at the very least, could guess that the writing didn't quite seem to match up with how he assumed the man that he had just met would write.
Perhaps it was one of the companions he'd mentioned.
He was researching the strengths and weaknesses of the king in the forest, Tarhun muttered to himself. Interesting.
What was that, Tarhun?
Elwood asked from atop a nearby ladder. Tarhun repeated what he had said. He continued to inspect the notes. He returned to the strengths and weaknesses page. It read, "Doesn't like water." Okay, that's cool. This was circled several times. Affinity to cold. Does not like heat. How to use to advantage. Minions. Nothing is left. We don't know the answer. Woodland, so maybe bears? Don't know. Talk to binnies. Get zombies. Connection to eyes? Stones? Let me know if you find anything, Tarhun shouted up to El, rising from his seat. Elwood cried out as he fell from another ladder in response. Tarhun shook his head at how drastically this man's competency and demeanor wavered between positive and negative extremes. He exited the room and began to search for Shirk. He made his way to the tower itself and found Shirk at a large window facing north. Shirk was talking with Fee, who had an armful of jerky and apples.
"Ah, Tarhun,"
Shirk said, seeing Tarhun approach. Have you discovered anything interesting? Tarhun asked.
"A lot of interesting things, actually," Shirk responded. "There's this encampment north of here. Also, the river is like a square, but not. You know, like part of a square where it goes..."
Shirk held out his forearm directly parallel to his chest.
"Like this."
A right angle? Fee asked.
"Yes,"
Shirk pointed to her.
"That thing. It does that in 2 places or so. And also, they got a magic workshop here."
He pointed back down the hall to a door that Tarhun had passed.
"I didn't take anything because I had the intelligence to first check if I would die before doing something that could have led to that. And guess what? Probably would have happened. So you're welcome."
Well done. I've discovered the king of the forest hates water, Tarhun told Shirk, and this likely has a connection to the right angles of the river.
"How did you find that out?"
Shirk asked, frowning. I read it in a book of notes that someone was keeping in the library.
Someone was keeping a book of notes in the library about the things the king in the forest doesn't like?
Shirk raised his eyebrow. I found this interesting as well, given that we are supposed to be in the home of the king of the forest. Tarhun nodded at Shirk's understanding.
"Can I take a look at that book?" Shirk asked. "I might not be able to understand it, but it seems like it seems weird."
It's down in the library. I didn't take it with me, lest it belonged to someone, and they discover it missing. Well, that would be foolish to do here, Fee agreed. Shirk pressed something further into a pouch at his side. Tarhun raised an eyebrow, but felt this wasn't the time. The three returned to the library. They returned to see Elwood maniacally searching through the books and comparing them to the notes in the notebook.
"Do you need to be left alone?"
Shirk asked innocently. Elwood looked up at him with wild, intense eyes. "Yes," he replied, and then turned back to the books.
Was he doing this when you left?"
Shirk asked nervously. "Not quite," Tarhun answered with a frown.
"Let's just creep around him and go for that book on the table there," Shirk suggested quietly. "Can I look at that book, please?" He pointed to the notebook, throwing Tarhun into confusion at the complete reversal of plan.
"What have you found, Elwood?"
Fee asked. 1 hour, Elwood said, not facing them. "How about I don't get it in 1 hour?" Shirk said, putting a very firm hand on Elwood's shoulder. "I get it now." Tarhun subconsciously felt for the handle of his sword. Elwood attempted to slap Shirk's hand away, but Shirk grabbed El's hand with his other one
and slammed it to the table.
"You're gonna give me the book," he told Elwood seriously. "Right now."
Elwood used his free hand to pull a knife from his belt. Shirk looked over at it and sighed, clearly not threatened. Tarhoon grasped his sword firmly, prepared to draw it if need be. But before he quite knew what had happened, Fee had grabbed the book and had begun to read it from across the table.
"Thank you," Shirk told her.
"This is some interesting information here," Fee mused absent-mindedly.
"I thought so as well."
Tarhoon released his hand from his sword. "My suspicions are that we are not in the presence of the actual king of the forest. I believe that these rivers were artificially created in order to create a barrier between the king of the forest and the rest of the land. You can see in the notes that it said he fears water. I also believe the people dwelling in this castle currently are studying up on the forest and are attempting to emulate him in order to take over his reputation."
"Wow,"
was Shirk's only response. "That was a lot of big words," Fee replied. "Did you understand that?" she asked Shirk.
"Well, no, that's actually exactly what I was thinking," he said. "Just the last part about the copying. Like playing a part or something. I had another idea. What if the king of the forest is just a dude, and these people are with him, and they're getting kind of tired of it? Because I listened in on one of their conversations while I was wandering around, and they don't seem to respect him from a nice sort of standpoint. They respect him in the sense that they gotta go in their room and all talk quietly with each other. Also, they're worried about bears, so maybe we can use that to our advantage in some way."
Tarhoon agreed that the one who they had thought was the king of the forest was clearly not a mystical entity, but he couldn't shake the feeling there was a real king of the forest who wasn't to be trifled with. Diverting the rivers beyond the fortress didn't make sense if the king of the forest was just someone living here in this fortress. Curious they would feel the need to talk privately in a room when the king supposedly isn't here, Tarhoon pointed out. Something about this whole situation still didn't seem quite right.
"Yeah, that's creepy too. They also didn't know we were supposed to be here, like that we were coming,"
Shirk agreed. Clearly, whoever is emulating the king of the forest does not seem to be someone who shares information with his comrades.
"Yeah, so either we're dealing with some sort of power takeover, or the king of the forest is a real guy and just couldn't care less about his people."
Either way, some of the people here clearly aren't entirely familiar with him. Otherwise, they wouldn't feel the need to research and study up on his strengths and weaknesses, Tarhoon pointed out. I'm not entirely sure the people who are here have been in contact with the king of the forest, if he is here for very long.
"If they don't like him, because clearly they can leave open a book out here detailing how to be him, then maybe we can help them overthrow him, like get rid of the king of the forest. Then maybe that cuts off the head of all the other problems. That stops the wagon attacks, Thessala gets his town back. Everything works out, we get money. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm putting down?"
Shirk had the same greedy glint in his eye, and Tarhoon didn't trust it. But too many things weren't adding up. Something else was off here. Why would these pretenders feel free enough to leave this book out in the open, where it could be easily seen if they planned to overthrow the king of the forest, yet feel the need to talk behind closed doors as though he could hear their every word? "There is still the issue of zombies, though," Tarhoon said aloud.
"Yeah, but they wouldn't be under control necessarily."
Shirk was cut off by the sound of the butler entering the library. Shirk quickly diverted conversation.
"And then I said, 'You should put it on my bill,' and then he didn't get it, so that was weird. Oh, hey!"
Tarhoon, who was facing away from the door, closed his eyes and sighed heavily. Then he turned to the man.
"Change in pitch I heard just now when I entered.
Almost as if you completely changed conversations when I got here, the butler mused. Also, why are you in the... Oh, wait, I told you where the library was.
Would you like an apple? Fee offered.
Is that from our stores? Yes, please.
The butler took the offered apple. There was a cracking sound as Elwood's head snapped to the side to look at the butler.
Oh boy,
the butler said, seeming concerned.
Yes, don't bother him. He's in the zone,
Shirk warned the man.
Oh.
In fact, you know what? Nah, never mind. Nothing. Forget it.
I see. All right,
the butler replied, his brow furrowed in confusion. Have you come to us for a reason? Tarhun asked, impatience betrayed in his voice.
Yes, actually. If you would follow me, I will bring you to the main amphitheater, and we shall discuss details.
The butler informed him. Elwood began to mumble something behind them, which involved the king of the forest. Very well. Lead on, Tarhun told him, before Elwood's mutterings could give away that they were on to their host.
Come now, and you shall meet my other companions.
The butler bowed and walked out. Tarhun heard Elwood slam the book he had been reading shut and stand from his position at the table. The four followed the butler out of the room. They eventually made it to the throne room of the large fortress. There was a central colonnade leading back to what was obviously 2 thrones upon a dais. As they entered, Tarhun noticed a wide groove split the room in 2, and another which separated the thrones from the rest of the amphitheater. Each groove was filled with water that ran through it, and both had a bridge across the center. Tarhun could clearly see it was a reference to the king of the forest's dislike of water, but the full extent of the myth still eluded him.
Interesting, Shirk mumbled. Why would they do that?
It's decorative,
the butler mumbled in response. At the thrones stood 4 people, although noticeably none of them sat upon either. There was a dwarf, Binis, whom they had met earlier, a third figure covered in furs to the degree where Tarhun couldn't tell what it was, and the final was a tiefling. Tarhun shivered at the sight of it. Tieflings had always unnerved him. The idea of being a fusion of something mortal with the unholy essence of an infernal just felt mortifying to him. In order to find out more about them, Tarhun said a prayer to Bahamut and asked for something that he was not particularly practiced in. He closed his eyes and breathed out. When he opened them, an aura appeared around each of the 4 on the dais. The dwarf possessed an aura of stone, rigid and immovable. The one next to him, whom the butler had called Binis, possessed an aura more akin to lightning or fire than the dwarf's more steadfast code. She placed her hand on her hip to emphasize her uncontrollable nature. This reminded Tarhun even further of... Tarhun shook his head to clear his thoughts. The one covered in bear pelts exuded a similar rigid aura as the dwarf, but this one was also touched with a sense of benevolence and goodwill as well. A warmth grew within Tarhun's body. The tiefling's aura was similar to Binis's, but despite that and his heritage, Tarhun could sense no malevolence from him. Tarhun glanced toward the butler and was astonished to see the same waves of fire and lightning, but this was flooded with outright malice. Tarhun subconsciously moved away from him. Tarhun breathed out, blinked again, and the auras were gone. Tarhun now also noticed that all the people on the dais were dressed for the cold, as well as the fact that the tiefling had glasses and looked very disgruntled. They stood awkwardly for a moment, waiting for one side or the other to begin speaking.
Tarhoon was surprised to find Fee the first to speak up. "Hello," she greeted cheerfully.
Yeah, hi, Shirk agreed.
"Bears," the pelted one responded, confusing everyone. "Grizz," Elwood responded as well, as though it were some secret code. Tarhoon saw fire light in the other person's eyes.
Yes, I am,
Shirk said happily, responding to no one.
I am that.
Tarhoon looked around in confusion, but finally the tiefling walked forward and began to speak. "Hello," he said. "So the king told you that you could all come here and crash at our place?" He sounded unamused, but his voice sounded scholarly.
He just kinda said to come here, honestly,
Shirk responded. "Is that so?" The tiefling pushed up his glasses. "He invited us to have a talk about this being his forest," Elwood said helpfully. "Specifically, the poor townspeople who've been attacked."
Yeah, we're on a mission to stop everything that y'all been doing. Kind of,
Shirk announced, exposing everything they'd uncovered. It was with great restraint that Tarhoon didn't show signs of his annoyance at this unplanned outing. "Hold on. What have we been doing?" the tiefling asked, raising his nose into the air indignantly. "That has attracted such ire."
"You've been attacking carts in the middle of the night,"
Shirk told him. "And the day. And a small palisade by the mine," Elwood added.
"Well, not really the day. There's just the zombies in the day,"
Shirk said quickly. "Carts have been being attacked on the road to and from the mine," Tarhoon said firmly, trying to clear it up. "And zombies have been spotted all throughout the forest, attacking travelers." One or two members on the dais glanced at each other.
"And these really creepy things that had weird-shaped heads,"
Shirk pointed out. Elwood removed some paper from his pack, and on the ground quickly drew a sketch of the taller being he had described. The dwarf and tiefling kept a stern face. Binnis looked at her other companions quickly, as did the pelted one. "A lot of people, who might have been described as close to innocent as you can get, were brutally attacked," Elwood reiterated, giving them a third version of the story. "And so we were hired to investigate that. Then we encountered a zombie who burned a lovely mark on our—" "Yes, you handed that back to our friend here." The tiefling moved his hand sideways from where it was clasped to his other one to indicate Binnis. "Yeah, the reason we're here is because we heard a voice talking through the zombie head, saying that he was the king of the forest, and telling us to come here," Fee added. This statement got a small rise out of the dwarf, who shifted uncomfortably and grumbled quietly.
"Are you okay there, friend?"
Shirk asked. The dwarf didn't respond. "Actually, hold on a moment. Who are you people? I just realized I don't know who any of you are," the tiefling told them.
"That doesn't," Shirk began.
"I'm Tarhoon," Tarhoon informed them. He was in no mood for games.
"Matter,"
Shirk finished, disappointed.
"Who are you?"
"Yorick," the tiefling told them.
"Your name is Yorick? Interesting,"
Shirk responded. "A.K.A. the man who wrote the notebook," Elwood cried out aloud. Tarhoon's heart sank.
"Thanks for tipping that hand, Elwood."
Shirk sounded as annoyed as Tarhoon felt.
"Ahem."
"What book? Oh no. The library." Distress filled the tiefling's face, and everyone in the room began talking at once.
"It was in the library! That was the first thing you people pointed out!"
Shirk cried at the tiefling. The tiefling, meanwhile, was yelling vacantly at the space where the butler had been, and then up into the air. "Why did you do that, Tim?" he yelled. This was the first moment that Tarhoon had noticed the butler had disappeared. "I have come to humbly request that you cease your assault on the mines folk," Tarhoon's loud voice cut through the din, "and lay to rest the undead that have been raised." Okay. Firstly, the undead are not my doing. Yorick glared at Binnis, who looked back at him defiantly. They're not exactly hostile, though. They've always asked friend or foe, Elwood pointed out. Tarhoon's head snapped left to glare at him. They are an abomination to all those who live on the earth, Tarhoon argued. Anyways, so, now that you know we visited your library, and you can tell us— I'm Fee, by the way, Fee said, trying to get them back on track. Nice to meet you. Someone who actually gave their name, Yorick responded. Tarhoon spread his hands wide in indignance.
I'm not telling you my name, Shirk responded.
His being belligerent wasn't helping. We shall call you Carpet, the tiefling said with a deadpan look.
Carpet.
Despite refusing to give his own name, the bugbear was clearly disgruntled at the moniker.
Do you really want to do that?
Well, I'm behind the water, so yes. The tiefling looked at Shirk disdainfully. Anyway, you were saying something. He looked at Fee. I was going to say that you have knowledge of the King of the Forest. Fee was interrupted by Yorick. That's actually something we wish to speak to you about, he told them. You see, now that we know why you're here— This time Shirk cut Yorick off.
Now you're going to kill us! Wah!
Shirk said mockingly. You know my name, but what are your names? Then continue, Fee said. Yorick looked unused to interruption. Yes, as I said, I am Yorick. This small fellow— Yorick patted the dwarf on the head. The dwarf looked displeased by this patronizing gesture. Is named Hendrik.
Keep doing that. It's a great idea,
Shirk said, seeing the dwarf unhappy and clearly hoping for a fight. And this— he walked up to Binnis and introduced her properly— is Binnis.
Binnis,
Shirk asked. Binnis, Yorick clarified. Her parents didn't love her.
Oh, like a bin.
Yes, Yorick said, unamused. You've already met Tim. He said the name distastefully. And this is Sally, he said, pointing to the one covered in bear pelts.
All right, well, my name is Shirk, Shirk responded. Not Carpet, not whatever else you were going to say. My name is Shirk.
Excellent. So we have a Fee, a Shirk, and a The tiefling trailed off. Tarhoon was becoming increasingly aware of the fact that this man was standing a bit taller than he was due to the dais he was standing on. It made the tiefling look and feel entirely above him. He hated the feeling. Tarhoon, Elwood replied, before Tarhoon could say his own name. Hold on, I'm probably the worst spokesperson for our group. Who's better? Yorick took the dwarf and pushed him to the front. Hendrik, you're on. Tarhoon preferred the angry dwarf glaring at him to the tiefling standing above him with his smug superiority.
Hi,
Shirk said. Tell us more about the King of the Forest, Tarhoon pressed, and your affiliation with him.
He's a boss, I guess,
Hendrik said in a gruff voice.
Why is he the boss?
Shirk asked. Elwood gave him a strange look.
He hired us and such,
Hendrik responded.
When did he hire you?
Shirk continued.
I don't remember,
Hendrik said. Shirk looked past him at the tiefling.
Yorick, when did you get hired? Look, I know when I'm talking to a terrible face, okay?
The dwarf began to stomp forward, but Shirk put out his hand toward him, without moving his eyes from Yorick.
I'm not talking to you. Please. All right, then. Just stay away from my shop, you hear?
Hendrik insisted.
Your shop? Shirk asked. Don't touch my stuff.
The dwarf hobbled back to his place next to the others.
I saw you up in the tower. Don't touch none of mine.
Great, Shirk replied sarcastically. The one dressed up in bear pelts stepped forward, whom Yorick had named as Sally. We're running a scam, she said blatantly. As I suspect, Tarhoon was cut off by Shirk.
I knew it!
He shouted at the top of his lungs. Tarhoon was cut off even sooner this time. Yeah, I guess the piece that's confusing all of us is, what about caravan attacks? Sally said. Confused glances passed between the party members before Shirk spoke again.
That's not yours? He asked.
No. It's been a hard time getting everything ready for our scam, Sally shrugged.
What was the scam? Shirk pressed.
What do you think? Sally replied. Pretending to be the king of the forest, Fee said. Yes, so we can take control of the mine, Sally confirmed. We just wanted to scare him away. We didn't want anybody to die.
I've seen this play before. Oh, Bahamut!
Shirk cried out in understanding. Tarhoon glared at the callous use of the name of his god, and he had no idea what Shirk was talking about. Several voices began to talk at once again, and Shirk was putting his hands to his head.
I've been to it! Ah!
He continued on like this for a while. Meanwhile, Elwood had sketched a better drawing of the creatures he had seen outside the barricades. See that? He asked the pretenders. It's a poor drawing because they were always seen at long distances. But long story short, these guys have been appearing out of the woods, attacking the palisade near the mine. And they've also been seen attacking caravans. The hells is that? Sally asked, confused.
We don't know!
Shirk cried. Tarhoon could clearly see the pretenders were not in charge of these creatures, and that had to mean the real king of the forest was.
We thought that this was your problem,
Shirk continued. Tarhoon had never been quite convinced of it, but he chose to say nothing. We just got some zombies and some crappy kobolds we got out of a mine, Sally replied indignantly. It's all kinds of stuff in those mines, mainly kobolds. And bodies for some reason, we're not sure why. You mentioned earlier you were hired by the king of the forest, though, Tarhoon began, but he was once again cut off. His blood was boiling now, but he refused to lose control.
Is he a real person, or did you make him up?
Shirk interrupted. Yeah, he's real. He went north with a bunch of zombies to deal with, well, I don't know. He doesn't tell us anything, Sally replied. She began to speak again, but Shirk cut her off before she even spoke a word.
Is he your leader, or...
Shirk began, but this time it was Tarhoon who interrupted.
What were you hired for? He demanded.
He's more like the ringleader of the scam. He has the ideas. We just follow him 'cause money, Sally responded, ignoring Tarhoon. Shirk inhaled heavily and tensed his shoulders at the term ringleader.
Oh, really?
He said through gritted teeth.
That's great.
What were you hired for? Tarhoon repeated. Well, protection against bears was my deal, Sally responded. That there the hairy one there, he's an artificer. He gets all the gadgets together, all the fun stuff. She pointed at Hendrik and then to Yorick. Otherwise, we got the old telepather, necromancer, she pointed to Binnis, and your bearmaster, she pointed to herself. How else you think we gettin' zombies? I mean, pretty self-evident.
All right, so basically, I guess, Shirk stammered. You haven't been attacking anything at night, he finally managed.
No, Sally responded vehemently.
You've just been having creepy zombies walking around.
Exactly. So you're also not responsible for a plague that has been sweeping the land, causing everything to decay? Elwood asked out of nowhere.
Yeah, Shirk pointed. That's a good question, Shirk agreed.
Wait, what now? Sally seemed taken aback.
Shirk looked at Binnis.
That's probably your fault, he accused.
I've just been raising the dead, Binnis responded. Down at the former docks of the region, the entire area is slowly decaying, Elwood continued.
There's no animals around anywhere when we came in here, Shirk added. You're here to defend against Grizz, but there's literally nothing out there.
Hovelsport is decaying. Then Stutter's Creek, the town is currently under panic and building up walls. And then the palisades erected around the mine because of strange aberrations with large claws that are able to chew through timbers, Elwood kept on. The pretenders fell silent.
How have you not been seeing this? Shirk demanded.
We've kind of been hanging out here for a couple months, Sally answered.
They never came to attack you.
Shirk sounded doubtful.
Not even once.
We came here, Sally began to say. You didn't have to deal with a cannibal?
Elwood sounded incredulous.
That guy was a piece of work, Sally admitted. He did actually kill one of us on the way in. I liked Jimmy. He was a good lad.
We killed him, by the way,
Shirk assured them.
What a poor orphan, Sally continued mournfully.
Yorick, Tarhoon said. He intended to bring this conversation back around to the mission, no matter what. What was your purpose in taking down the strengths and weaknesses of the King of the Forest?
To better emulate it, for
Spriggy, the tiefling said. What do you know of the lands farther north?
Not a whole lot. I haven't actually ventured up there. There's an old town, though. I think it was something to do with the mine man beforehand. He was trying to establish something there, but that failed. Mr. Stutter? Elwood asked, raising an eyebrow.
Maybe. I don't remember.
Thessala,
Shirk asked.
No, I don't know who that is.
How long ago was this?
Shirk continued.
From what I've observed from our observatory, I would surmise at least 20 years or so. Actually, our boss went up there recently to, as he said, deal with competition.
Can you tell us exactly how long ago he left? Tarhoon asked.
Merely 1 or 2 days now, I would say, Yorick replied. So, when he contacted us, he decided to head out the door to investigate, Elwood mused. You see, we use these zombies as more than mere bodies in the army. They are used as communication cases. The network we've established has gone silent. Something has been targeting our kobolds and zombies, and he went up because he thought he knew what. Because he was an idiot, Yorick said.
I mean, we did fight a few, Shirk admitted awkwardly, but nothing like that.
We only took down 2 of your communication network, as you helped one of your kobolds and one of your bigger zombies get back on patrol,
Elwood said quickly, deflecting blame.
Wait. Did this kobold have a square coin? The tiefling said.
No, Shirk said deliberately. Not a square coin.
He had a star, Tarhoon said firmly.
Oh, shut up,
Shirk reprimanded.
Galvanax, Yorick hissed.
Yep, that was him,
Shirk confirmed.
Rebellion amongst the ranks? Elwood asked.
Galvanax has been a sore spot ever since the Great War, Yorick replied. Elwood laughed loudly.
We got here through unusual circumstance. We did not get to this valley the way you did. We took an under route. There was a war between the drow, the kobolds, and the flumphs, I believe. It was all rather dreary. Galvanax thought we were part of... I've said too much. Look, the point is, I hate Galvanax.
The Flumps? How is that fighting anything? Shirk mumbled.
Sally came forward again. Look, I think the plan was, he wrote up a page or two of bullet points or something. I think he was planning to buy you off and have you join in. Which is dumb. I think that our boss is not the brightest man.
Is he human? Tarhoon asked. Hold on, can we discuss this?
Shirk looked at the group.
Can we get a word together here in private?
Can I get an answer to my question first? Tarhoon looked at him, motioning to the pretenders. He ain't no human. Ain't no human I seen, Sally replied. Too green for that.
Tarhoon, listen to me,
Shirk insisted.
He huddled the group together. They're running a scam. Does Thessala seem like a trustworthy guy to any of you?
Not particularly, Fee admitted. We had our questions with him, Elwood agreed.
Tarhoon replied non-committally. We could get in on this action.
Shirk raised an eyebrow and shrugged. Perhaps, Elwood cocked his head slightly.
Then again, is it really worth it? Let's talk about it. Is this really worth getting in on? Or is this worth turning down? Shirk pressed.
There's a bit more information I would need to get before I put my decision down on that, Elwood decided.
That's a good idea, Shirk agreed.
Elwood turned from the group and looked to the pretenders. He's been paying you? Like, how much? He asked them. Because obviously I wouldn't want to stick around here for very long without some actual decent pay. The pretenders were silent for a moment, and then Binnis made a frustrated noise. You haven't been getting paid, have you?
We're going to be paid on completion of the things we're doing here, Shirk informed them, and finding out that we just happened to stumble upon a party of very capable people, perhaps, maybe, you could help us take down these creepy things.
Tarhoon remembered now that these were simple mercenaries, only loyal to whomever paid most. The thought that they were perfectly willing to switch sides, only deciding against it when they realized it was less profitable, though, still made him sick to his stomach. When you say you're getting paid, how much are we talking here? Sally asked, seeming interested.
We're talking pay night. 1 each, Shirk responded.
Tarhoon glanced at Shirk, aware that this Thessala had offered the pretenders no such bargain. Tarhoon certainly wasn't going to sacrifice his pay to this scum. But Sally was clearly hooked.
Those are the things you were trying to take the mine for, Shirk continued.
Oh, we're very aware of what the blue pay night is, Sally responded. The real gemstone is that pale one Thessala got in his office. Something sparked in Elwood's eyes, and he looked at Sally with a suspicious smirk. You said earlier you didn't know Thessala, he said slyly. Yep. I did, didn't I? Sally responded awkwardly. Elwood clapped slowly. I'm not very good at lying, I'm not gonna lie.
So were you involved at all in a previous job with him then? Shirk asked.
No, we just did a little homework before coming on out here.
Well, I think 10... How many of us are in here? 10 in this room? I'm pretty sure considering how desperate Thessala is now.
Tarhoon couldn't stay quiet any longer. He had been content to let the others ask questions while he stayed quiet, but this was too much. I could not reconcile it with either my beliefs or my God to work with scum such as this, he said firmly. Shirk looked annoyed and disappointed. Now that's right hurtful, that is, Sally told him. Okay, he's a little blunt, Fee tried to smooth it over.
Think about it like this. We're working with them to try and figure out what's going on with this greater evil, Shirk said, getting in front of Tarhoon to look him in the face. They just want the mine. They're not attacking people. They're just scaring people. Try to get some perspective. The way I see it, they got those zombies. Yeah, that's a big deal. That's creepy. I get it. They are creating abominations, which make a mockery of the life that we live, Tarhoon said resolutely. Yeah, but is that really as bad as people literally being killed and disappearing in the middle of the night? Shirk argued. Out of nowhere. And they don't even know what's going on.
Elwood moved in front of the group and tried to begin explaining to the pretenders what was going on, but Shirk continued.
So Tarhoon, I'm thinking that if we work together with these people to try and undo a greater evil, it might, work.
Shirk held his hands out in front of him, trying to emphasize his point. Tarhoon couldn't expect someone loyal to nothing but money to understand what a slippery slope concession was. Shirk, you're literally asking for a miracle, Elwood said, turning to them. On behalf of Bahamut.
I'm not asking for a miracle. I'm just asking for Tarhoon to turn a blind eye now so he can bring on the righteous pummeling fury to the big thing that causes the worst problems.
Shirk slammed his fist into his hand for emphasis. Tell y'all what. How about you sleep on it? We'll rediscuss in the morning. See what y'all think, Sally offered. Tarhoon was entirely sure that his opinion would not change. I was going to say we could continue it at dinner, Elwood replied. Just loot the pantries down below. We really don't care. Sally's shoulders slumped with exhaustion. We got some stuff to discuss anyway with old Spriggy. Also, one last question. Why did Tim slither off? Elwood asked curiously. I don't know. I don't want to know, Sally shivered.
Yeah, but, what does Tim do?
Shirk asked. All I gotta say is watch the ceilings. We can't be rid of him. He's been here a while. He was a package deal with the place, unfortunately, Sally told them. Something's wrong with Tim. I don't even think Tim is his real name. I don't know what his deal is. And the fact that he pointed us toward your weakness book, Elwood continued. Yeah, he's not the most pleasant fella. Let's put it that way. Tell you what, it's getting late, Sally said. It's getting late, right? I think it's getting late. Does anyone know? The tower had no windows, so it was impossible to tell.
When I looked from the tower, it was evening, Shirk informed them, so it's probably getting late.
Sally motioned towards Shirk in agreement, and the pretenders filed out of the throne room. The party, with little else to do... That's how I'm going to get them to talk, Elwood said suddenly, maniacally. A hearty breakfast!
They've actually talked a lot, Elwood. They've told us a lot of things, Shirk replied.
Yes, but there's more, Elwood countered.
They're willing to not immediately kill us for discovering that this is a scam. They told us that it was a scam, and they're not attacking us right now. So...
Shirk's eyes went wide before he fell into a whisper.
We need to prepare in case they attack us in our sleep.
And you said the people we need to prepare for, in case they kill us in our sleep, are the ones we should take on our journey, Tarhoon countered.
I'm saying...
I believe my point stands greater than before, Tarhoon said decisively.
I just realized the issue, okay? I'm saying there's a valuable resource to exploit with them. We don't necessarily have to like them,
Shirk responded sharply. They're as worried about us as we are of them, Fee pointed out. I don't particularly like this train of thought, Shirk, Elwood warned. They are people. Kind of similar to you.
One is a necromancer. That's not a person, Shirk retorted.
I don't... Elwood trailed off with a frown.
Tarhoon would agree, Shirk pointed to Tarhoon. Right, Tarhoon?
That also does not put a solid point in their favor, Tarhoon replied smugly.
My point still stands. It's just really creepy, Shirk replied.
I don't know. Is a skeleton that much of an abomination? If it's wearing clothes and all, Elwood asked. From the conversations I've had with Tarhoon about his beliefs, he would say yes, Fee responded. Tarhoon wasn't sure he liked someone else speaking for him, even if she was right.
It's a mockery of life, he argued, anger rising in him again. Life falsified and created by mortal hands, not by the gods above us.
Okay, this is all very important, but I think what's maybe more important is that we learned that these people and the King of the Forest have little to no idea about the creepy long things that attacked the mine. Or at least, they say they don't.
Fee interrupted before the argument could begin anew. Elwood decided to wander away from the party at this point. That's true. They didn't seem to react very much to that. Shirk nodded quietly in agreement. We'll talk to them tomorrow about it, but... He trailed off. I refuse to work with a necromancer, Tarhoon stated clearly. You wouldn't be working with her, necessarily. Tomorrow I fully intend to demand that she put her craft to rest, Tarhoon said aloud. For her own sake, he added in his head. Fee sighed uneasily.
Maybe we should wait a few days, she told Tarhoon, so we can survive.
We wouldn't really be working with her. We'd kind of force her to help us with things, Shirk clarified. The idea of forcing someone to perform those foul things made Tarhoon feel revolted, and then be rid of her afterwards. That seems extremely dishonorable, Tarhoon replied. And then be rid of her afterwards, Shirk repeated. He sighed. Okay, well, how about the artificer guy? He seems like he knows a lot about magic and weapons, possibly. Tiefling guy seems to know things about the arcane. I'm always on the hunt for more spells to do, instead of just punching things. Elwood is interested in Tim, I don't know why. At the very least, that weird dwarf dude. He's not, bad, right? Shirk looked at Tarhoon expectantly. Tarhoon thought for a moment. He would only consider Binnis if she gave up her craft. Hendrik and Sally were good potential allies, though. Tarhoon didn't like the tiefling. I would be willing to consider Hendrik for our group, he replied finally. Yes, that's what I'm saying, Shirk said. And perhaps Sally, Tarhoon said after another moment. Oh yeah, Sally seems interesting, Shirk agreed.
You like hairy people, do you? Fee joked.
I mean, I'm made of hair. Yes, Shirk said with absolute certainty, a grin spreading across his face. I would consider those two, but no others, Tarhoon said firmly. Sounds good to me, Shirk nodded. Very well, Tarhoon agreed. Just don't instantly try to kill the necromancer, Shirk added quickly. Tarhoon was offended by the idea that he would so callously dispose of a valuable life like that. I fully intend to give her the chance to plead for Bahamut's mercy and put her craft to rest, Tarhoon told him. If she did not take it, he might need to do what must be done.
I'm going to go talk with Hendrik about something, so I will see the two of you later, Fee said aloud, and then moved off in her own direction. This left Tarhoon and Shirk together, but deciding there was nothing else that needed to be discussed before the morning, they walked in silence. As they reached the rooms, Shirk finally spoke up. Shirk looked at the ground, then back at Tarhoon, who was standing in the doorway. I know you don't care about me in general, but I'm just gonna start right now.
I don't have a whole lot of opportunities to make friends. Considering what I am. So I'm willing to meet you halfway. I'm sorry.
Shirk looked up into Tarhoon's eyes, and Tarhoon was surprised to see genuine regret in Shirk's eyes. The bugbear's shoulders were slumped, and his whole posture drooped with a vulnerability Tarhoon didn't expect the bugbear was capable of. The bugbear held Tarhoon's gaze, however. He extended his hand to Tarhoon. Tarhoon reached forward carefully, still not entirely certain it wasn't a trick, but willing to test it. He took Shirk's hand and shook it.
Thanks,
Shirk said. He looked as though he was about to say something more, but closed his mouth. He turned to open his own door, and then turned back to Tarhoon with a soft smile on his face.
But still, though, if I find another friend and you are morally opposed to it existing, I will not let you hurt them.
Please refrain from making friends with abominations, or those who practice abominable arts, Tarhoon said firmly, even coldly. He was surprised to find rejection at his own words. He believed in them, of course, but the way that he said it stirred memory within him. Memories of being on the receiving end of speech like that.
In case you hadn't noticed, Shirk said bitterly from behind him, I am an abomination.
There was silence for a few moments, and then Tarhoon said, I don't see it that way. Then he passed through his door and closed it.